Okay, is Ecommerce Roundtable worth it? So, Ecommerce Roundtable, I'm just back from it 3 weeks ago. I was in Austin, 2 weeks ago, sorry. It cost a pretty penny. A ticket is relatively cheap at £400 or $400 per ticket, but then you have to factor in flights. If you're flying from the UK, $800. If you're flying from inside of the US, probably a couple hundred as well. Then hotel, if you're staying 2 nights or 3 nights, you're talking $800 to $1,000. So all in all, you're talking 2K before you're done. Before you've bought any food, you've bought any drinks. So it's an expensive trip. What does that get you? So roughly 400 people attend, 70% of which are brands. 30% is split between SaaSes and agencies, arguably the two worst people in the world. You get 10 talks from people who are working in e-commerce, and then you get also pitched about 10 softwares. The main value I found is in meeting people and the way the event is set up. So you have breakfast and then basically presentation, pitch, presentation, lunch, presentation, pitch type thing. So the lunch and the breakfast allow for real networking, and that's where you can meet people. And I would say the American community in e-commerce is very like open-minded, or at least they are at this event. So people like go out there and they shake hands and they're quite positive. Certainly in some conferences I've been to in the UK, it can feel a bit hollow and there's not so much meeting people, but in this instance there definitely was, which was really valuable. In terms of speakers, there were some great speakers. There were some that I thought were underwhelming. The one thing I would say is that all speakers are generally quite qualified, really qualified, and their presentations are pretty good. It's just depending on where you are in your life cycle, be that in business but also personally. Some ideas you're more open to and resonate with you in comparison to other ideas and presentations that really don't resonate with you, and that's why they maybe weren't as impactful and you kind of like skipped over them. So I'm going to run through basically everyone who spoke. Well, not everyone, but the things that stood out to me. I'm also just going to talk on, is it worth the £2,000 or $2,000, which is about £1,500 at the minute. So the first talk was from Cuts, the guy who founded it and is the CEO of it. And it was a bit of it was a discussion really talking about all things great about Cuts. There wasn't too much on strategy here. There was maybe a wee bit talk about tariffs, which is a bit historical. The interesting things, there was a little bit talks about AOV and really new product, which allowed them to scale as well. And I guess this is what kind of a lot of people know, but hearing it firsthand is interesting. The second talk was my favorite of the whole thing. It was from Brock, who's the CEO of Frostbody and the founder. He talked all things TikTok shop. So this was high level in terms of he explained the actual impact it was having on his brand. Basically, he thinks the halo effect is over 100 million it'll drive. And he also showed how they're running it. So it was tactical as well as illustrating kind of the impact, which was good because sometimes there's speeches where people do tactical stuff but they don't really show how it's making the impact, and then vice versa where people are only showing the impact but not any tactical stuff. So that was really, really good, and I'd recommend anyone to go and watch it. I know they've been posting the videos. For us, we looked at it, and TikTok Shop's something we didn't do for a good while, and it was a good decision. We prioritized resources elsewhere, and that's been quite successful for us, but I think it's something we're open to revisiting as we grow. Then Snapchat panel after that was a bit salesy because you had agency folk, and then you had Carhartt on there, and you also had a Snapchat representative, so obviously going to basically shill Snapchat. Carhartt though was interesting, legacy brand, 138 years old. There's a lot to be taken from that. It's not very replicable though, because just basically they're a legacy brand, and a lot of their success is from the fact that they have that history and they can play on it for a brand story, which is very hard when you're a new company. But I like the way they did like the partnerships or friends of Carhartt, and it was like authentic storytelling. They only partnered with people who actually wore Carhartt. I want to add, by the way, so basically I took notes on every one of these, and I took basically 2 pages worth of notes on every presentation, even the ones I didn't find too interesting. It's the only way I can really listen in is if I force myself to listen in via the process of notes. So these are kind of notes on notes, and I'm just running through them. We had a lot of AI talks in the afternoon, and it was very theoretical. AI talks are interesting, however, for me, they're not the fun talks. I find them hard because people are often talking about where they think AI is going, and it's very hard to implement. There's not a lot of impact that you can see out of the back of it. If someone was telling me the system that's made them hundreds of thousands, I think that would be more interesting, but often it's intangible benefits and really just eulogizing on how great they are at AI. It's a trending topic that I think isn't as interesting as people believe. So before we arrived at the next day, you then had a happy hour and a couple of dinners, which were really good and was a nice way to like meet new people and get conversations going, and it was a nice ending to that first day. Then you had the next day Molly from Smart Marketer. She talked quite high level about like meta advertising and Andromeda, but a couple of things I took out of from her conversation was she mentioned about running non-profits, and I thought that was quite noble. And we're lucky in the advertising world that we have a lot of skills, or as a founder you have a lot of skills, and you can apply those skills to other causes that could be fulfilling in ways that sometimes money can't be. And that was inspiring, and I'd love to find a means of doing that, although it's not apparent to me now. She then talked about Andromeda and stuff like that, but what I took out of that was she mentioned how they've been running split tests on site at Smart Marketer, and they'd seen some weird effects where they'd win a split test and then they would start putting spend behind it, and all of a sudden results would crash. And their theories and beliefs are that Meta's Andromeda is picking up the different URLs and it was sending traffic specific to each URL, which I believe could be possible because we have seen similar results ourselves when running split tests recently. And so the emphasis then is on the marketer to make the landing page more congruent to the ad. And I'll give an example of this. Someone who's riding in a tube, say, versus someone who is in bed at night, they both have different amount of times they can spend on the website. So someone who's on the tube is in a rush, they can only spend a couple of minutes on the website. Someone who is in bed can spend 10, 15 minutes. And so maybe it's best to send them to a listicle if they were, say, in bed, or if they were on the tube, it's just the PDP. These kinds of instances, I think Meta going forward, and I'm talking maybe in a year or 2 years time, will allow people to input multiple different landing pages, and then it will select the landing page it thinks best for each scenario. Obviously, Andromeda is meant to serve ads to people who are most likely to interact with them and purchase for them. So I believe that's where the future is going. I think the onus is really on marketers now to be very smart with what they're building on website as well as the ad level. Then after that was Buffalo, Brandon Fink, who gave a lot of good interesting stuff about media buying. It was very technical. I took a lot of photos, a lot of slides, and there's a few things that we started implementing, like graveyard campaigns, and we're looking at whitelist campaigns as well, which was off the back of that talk. Then we had Dean talked on AI again. This was probably the most interesting AI talk in terms of applications of it, although it was well delivered, but whether I'm going to action on it is something I don't know if I am, because it wasn't laid out on how you could actually action on it. So it would require research to get to that stage. Afterwards, we had a financing talk, and this is something I think is quite overlooked at a lot of these events. It's just marketing, marketing, marketing. However, finance is really important, and that was good. I hadn't really heard of the finance company before. I think a few things I took out of that was you don't want to get into a debt cycle and the people with the most capital win. Again, maybe that's obvious to people, but it is good advice to hear. Finally, we had Connor, who does CRO for LTV, and he was talking about, chaos in testing, which often happens. I've seen it ourselves, and how that compounds. And then secondly, how offer is the most important thing, and really people should test offer way more than they do. They're too busy testing what color the buy button should be. Lastly, you had Isaac talking about different channels. This hit home for me because we're such a meta dependent channel, and how there's different ways to advertise. Isaac, from his background, used to be selling knives, so he couldn't advertise on Meta, so he had to advertise for YouTube, on organic YouTube, and really he found great success there. He talked about other channels that really are neglected, such as Pinterest, Snapchat, Twitch, and streamers, and so that got me thinking, and I think YouTube and TikTok is something we really want to invest in going forward. So overall, it was really good. There was a lot learned. I'd say the most influential things for me that I learned out of it is maybe we need to diversify our marketing mix a bit more, and the powers of TikTok Shop which was really interesting, and it made me kind of rethink our strategy there. Would I say Ecommerce Roundtable is worth it? Yes. And as a result, I plan to go to the one in San Diego. There's 2 events a year, and I think they're going to spin off tons of events. People don't know about it. It's hosted by 2 unks of the e-commerce community, I want to say, in the best way, Nick and Jimmy. And it's probably the premier e-commerce event in the US. To my knowledge, it's something I've been wanting to go to for quite a while. And why do I think it's worth the investment? Well, I think the quality of speakers is really high compared to other events. The cost of the ticket is accessible. You can bring team members there. Now, if you add accommodation and travel in, it does get expensive, but that's naturally the way it is. And I think the US industry is always 2-3 years ahead of where we are in the UK. So it's nice to hear and learn from people. So I think over time, there's a bit of diminishing returns with these events. Keep in mind that you probably meet the same people and you probably hear similar speeches. But I think relationships can compound. And so from that point of view, it's not drastic diminishing returns. And maybe if the compounding relationships, you build up a bit of reputation, it could actually be beneficial as a result to go every year or every 6 months. And so I'm looking forward to probably going, at least for the next couple of years, once a year or twice a year, and studying again. And we'll probably do continuous kind of feedback loops on, is this worth going to? Is it worth investing the money? If I was a business and I was in the brand/e-commerce world and I was probably greater than 50,000 a month in revenue, I think it is a worthwhile endeavor to invest your capital in this. Because ultimately, in business, the only way to grow is by improving yourself. I think this is one of the worthwhile ways in which you can do it. So I hope that was a good summary of what I experienced. I really enjoyed Austin, the city. I enjoyed the experience on the whole, and I hope that you all found value in this episode. Next week, I'm going to be breaking down my trip to New York and the release of our first claw machine in America and in New York and how that all went. Appreciate everyone supporting, and I'll be back next week.